Oh, thank you for joining me today on the Private Investigator Experience podcast. I'm your host, Phil Little, answering the questions, what's a day like in the life of a PI? But before I do, because this is a very important day in America, it's Veterans Day. Happy Veterans Day to all my veterans and my friends and those that I don't know. If you served, thank you and God bless you. And I just watched a very moving service on Saturday night at the World Outreach Church in Tennessee. They guest speaker Chad Robichak, who is a former Marine Recon Special Forces into Afghanistan 8 times. One of those that went in early, blending with the locals, and just had an amazing career. But dealt with all kinds of issues when he come home, and he talks about those. But at the end of it, he told about someone he was having on his podcast, Aaron Hale, another soldier who came back blind, couldn't hear, and went through that thing in life that many of us have gone through, thinking we don't really have anything to live for. His story is very touching and worthwhile. So check that podcast out at Chad Robichek or the World Outreach Church. I think you can connect with it there. And the soldier's name is Aaron Hale, and he's on his podcast. Now, back to the PI life. Well, I've structured our operation based on my law enforcement model and my experience there. And I pulled in a lot of my military intelligence service, and then adding a touch and maybe a big touch of my biblical worldview, because I found out that that handbook, the Bible, is also the best investigator training tool that we can have. I've been asked thousands of times, probably over the last 50 years, from all over the world, wherever I go, what's it like to be a PI? What is your day like? Is it dangerous? Is it like television? All these questions. And I would, particularly from women who would, these big eyes would be open, so just engrossed in you. And every one of them would usually say, "Oh, I would be a great PI. Will you hire me?" And on it would go. Well, prior to the internet, no, the remote meeting possibilities we have now, we were established much like a police department. We had a headquarters station, we had a front desk, and people would come through the door in those days before they had that internet to easily find you or connect. And they would come and tell the front desk they had a problem, and it would be everything that you could think of. In my early days, I would meet with every client that came through those doors as walk ins when I was in the office, unless I was traveling for some reason. And the ones that would be calling that I would go to meet with in their offices, like the one I'm going to talk about today. Well, what I loved about those early days was the ability to listen to people and have a blank slate about what I could suggest that would help them. In public law enforcement, we were restricted to what we could say and do. So I couldn't always recommend the kind of things that might be their best help for them. Sometimes they didn't need a detective, but a counselor or prayer from a God that loved them to come and help them. With the thousands of cases that we had, there would be hundreds that would go away without hiring me, without paying me, with a solution to their problem and hope for a new life. And that was worth every minute that I spent with them. I was a early morning person. I would be at the office early, times 6:30, or at least 7. We had a 24-hour team who would deal with after hours problems and a 24-hour communication with all of our agents and units out. And my first stop would be in that 24-hour center. And they would always have a summary of what had gone on the night before and issues and how they had dealt with them. I like that. And I would move on to a short staff meeting with the people and talk about what we had going on to that day. Then, as I went to my office and I was sitting there, and instance, you have a call from a man that wants to talk to you about an issue they have. As I picked up the phone and said, "Hello, how can I help you?" I heard him and knew it because he was one of the executives of a studio close by. This is an older case. I'm not going to talk about names at this point. I feel that in our world, it's best that I don't do that. He said, "We have a serious situation coming up, very sensitive, and we're concerned about leaks coming out prematurely before this is made public. Could you come up and meet with us?" And I said, "Sure." We picked a time at 2 p.m. that afternoon. He gave me his address and the suite and the floor they were on. And so I arranged to go meet with them. Then, before I hung up, he said, "Do you still have limos?" And I said, "Yes, we do." He said, "Okay, see you later." As I got off the phone, I called in my operations chief and said that we have a meeting I want you to go with me on up at the studio. I'm not sure what the situation is, but it seems to be very sensitive. We arrived at his office at 2 p.m. and they ushered us into the conference room where there were four individuals, three men and a woman. The CEO was at the meeting, and their chief legal officer was also there. And he said, "We want to retain you, but we need to have you sign this NDA so we can give you all the information." I reviewed it. It was standard. I had my operations chief sign one. I signed one. And then, as I gave it back, he passed a check over to me for $10,000 as a retainer, solidifying the retainer agreement. They were very concerned about security. The CEO gave us the background on why this was important, as they were meeting with a foreign company about the purchase of the studio, and for it to leak out to the public before it was complete could cause disruption and might block the sale. We're concerned about having them meet here where people would see them coming and going and weeks of people maybe overhearing things they shouldn't. And what we would like to do is have you take them out in your limo with our team and drive around and being out where no one could record it, overhear it, so that the basics of the agreement could be agreed on so we could finish the paperwork and make this thing happen. I said, "Sure, we can handle that." I asked him how many would be coming to be in the car, the limo. And he said 8 people. And I said, "Okay, we can handle that because the limo is a 10 passenger. We talked about any kind of drinks or refreshments or snacks they would want in the car. Then we also discussed when the buyers would be coming in. They would be coming by private jet into Van Nuys Airport, and he wanted us to arrange to pick them up. And then we were going to have another limo pick up the clients at the studio. They were going to leave there, and we would rearrange a meeting place so that the buyers wouldn't have to come to the studio in that particular meeting. So they were very concerned about the security of this. And as I looked around the conference room in the area, I thought, this maybe could be a big time. They should do a electronic bug sweep. So I suggested them about doing an electronic sweep of their location and the conference room, and they agreed to that. And so that electronic sweep of we call the listing devices bugs, as you've probably heard, and would do that night when nobody was in the offices. When we went back to our headquarters, my concern was the security on our end, which was just as important as the security at the client's location that they were concerned about. Even though we had very professional people, people were people. And you can never be 100% sure, no matter the limits you go to make sure that you've got honest, dedicated, committed people who knows when to keep their mouths shut, even though their ears have heard things they shouldn't. So I went over all these details with our operations chief and also our electronics division, which would handle the bug sweep. I gave them the information about the client's contact and set up that location and do it within the next week, as we wanted that done before we got closer to the client meeting with the potential buyers. I also had each one of our team members there that knew what was going on sign another NDA, particularly for this situation. I also informed them that whoever you think should be our driver and the bodyguard with them, then I want to meet with both of those individuals before the situation is concluded with them, and they will not be told anything about what was going on or what the clients were going to be doing. And it would just be a situation where they were going to be driving clients to a location. And that was going to be something that we wanted nailed down very tight. And so, in creating the file on this client, I created a dummy file with a number on it and kept all the real information in the safe under their name until the case would be finished. And these next 2 weeks, we were on the phone with the client a lot, talking about details, their concerns that they might be having. We had mapped out a route that we would be driving, which would be we wanted it on flat ground, not going around curves or up and down hills, which in the back of a limo, if you've ever been in one, it's more pronounced than being in the front of the limo or in a car. So we wanted to be very conducive to talking and papers not flying around over the back. So we laid out that, gave it to the clients, and they approved that. And we talked about the time frame on when we would pick up their executives and go to meet the limo at this remote location we had established, which would be where the both limos would meet, and then they would all get into the one limo that we had selected to be their conference room, their boardroom, the secure one with all the walls hardened so nobody could hear. Right? Yes. Well, this case was very important because the studio, we'd done things for them before and was a big potential client because we did a lot in the entertainment industry. So I wanted to make sure it went right. There could not be any glitches, not one. So I followed this like an old mother hen, I suspect. No, my team thought I was a real perfectionist. And I guess I really was. I didn't like to hear from clients if there was a problem. That was my old Air Force model. Prevent, prevent, prevent. You had a jet airplane. We put them up in the air, and we wanted to make sure they didn't come down before they wanted to land because we had the life of the pilot and the plane at stake. So we rehearsed this. We planned and overplanned, run through the routines, had the cars out, went through both of the cars, one leaving the studio, one leaving the airplane, into the location. I mean, the time it would take for both cars to get to this location, we didn't leave anything to chance. And as it would be when D-Day came, everything went off without a glitch. That was a West Coast Detectives International way. The airport went smooth. The meeting with the limo from the studio went smooth. There 4 hours they rode around talking. And I don't know how much our and bodyguard heard. They claimed they really didn't hear anything. But we made sure that there wasn't anything that leaked, and it didn't. Nothing leaked from our end, nothing leaked from the client's end until it was announced about the sale. And the electronic sweep at the office that we did the week after we were there, it revealed there were some weak spots in their executive offices, procedures, and physical structure that they could correct, and they could have a better sense of security and making sure people weren't remotely recording in their meetings with them. We set up some electronic measures to detect if someone was recording. We also set up some devices on phones that would monitor any third party activity. So we did everything we could to secure their communications, not only for this case, but for the future. After it was done, the buyers were on their way back home and the clients were back at the studio. The next day, I received a big thank you and with a job well done. And that was more important to me than the money and the fees that were paid. If you like, leave some comments. I would really appreciate that. Or questions on any of the platforms. Or if you have a case that you would like to hear about, if you would have some specific question about a private eye or private investigation or anything about that, what's going on in the world, send it to me, leave it on any platform, or you can email me directly at pi777 at gmail.com. You help me by liking, sharing, subscribing, and you know the drill. Hit that notification bell for future posts. That would really help us a lot. Till next time, be safe. May God bless you, your family, and may God bless America.